Okay, now I normally don't start by saying this, but this episode is about relationships. And I can get it, it's a podcast that discusses relationships, like what else could it be about? But in this particular episode, I think that was like the most common factor amongst everything because I have a bunch of fake relationships, I have a bunch of casual relationships, and I have some real ones. And at some point, I have to call out some, joke about others, and criticize the rest. So, in some ways, you can say that it's different because it's not like I'm trying to defend one side against the other. But in some ways, you can say that this episode is still more or less like your typical relationship podcast. But, anyways, as I continue trying to debate whether this is different or not, let me just kick things off with the very first story, which I think should be particularly interesting. Now, there is a Ghanaian influencer who goes by the name of Mona Faiz Montrage, who has been extradited to the US for romance scams. And I find that to be particularly interesting because normally it's Nigerian men, not Ghanaian women. But let me just kind of give a little bit of context. Now, this Ghanaian lady is a social media influencer and she's been extradited to the US of A from the UK for allegedly swindling over $2 million from older single American men and women in a romance scam. She has a total of 4 million followers on her Instagram page, Hajia for Real. Now, when you kind of look at this entire story, and I don't know, maybe it's just me, after listening to the whole fake prince stories and now hearing that babes are actually scamming dudes, can the passport bros actually understand that Africa isn't this treasure trove of third world submissive women and just back the fuck off for a little bit? I don't know. Is it just me that's noticing this?
Get ready for the battle of the sexes.
Because at some point, I think people just started doing this whole thing where you think that you can start communicating with someone else online from a different country, a supposedly poorer country by, American or English standards of some sort, and then they suddenly believe that you can get yourself some person here that you can probably marry who will take care of you and love you because what? You're from the West and you have a stronger currency? Like, I don't know, maybe it's just me that thinks of it this way, but whenever I hear a story of some foreign individual or individuals got scammed because they were busy communicating with this person online and they felt like they had a connection and either they met or they didn't meet, but at some point when they were busy planning to come together, this person suddenly has an issue and then you, the person, ends up bailing them out by sending, I don't know, a couple of thousand, if not tens of thousands of dollars, all in the name of love. Like, I usually tend to wonder, do some of these people just want to be scammed? Like, you think you having some sort of a connection over, I don't know, Wi-Fi and shit for about 2-3 months, if not even weeks sometimes, is going to magically create the kind of connection that you want with a person as opposed to you actually spending multiple moments with them physically? Then on top of that, there's the ones that think that they're a lot smarter and a lot more coy, and then they'll come and they'll spend like maybe a month with this person as if this person can't fake a bunch of shit for a month. Like, sometimes I listen to foreigners complaining that they were scammed by some African woman or man, and you actually listen to their story and it's almost like they were asking for it. But considering that I know that there are some non-Africans that actually listen to my podcast, I might as well give you guys a couple of pointers so that you hopefully don't get scammed or played by a lot of our women. So here's what I will tell you for a fact. Dear women, that Nigerian prince does not need your money if he was actually a Nigerian prince. If the guy's money is held up, he probably has friends who can give him money, and if he doesn't have those friends, he probably has other ways of getting money besides you that he's having a relationship with I don't know how many thousand miles away from him. Then to the men, and more so the passport bros, just because the babe is from a third world country doesn't mean that she can't play you. Like, this whole thing of thinking that she's going to be more submissive just because she's from a third world country, like, come on. We have Instagram, we have WhatsApp, we have a bunch of social media, and we've consumed a bunch of your content, so a lot of the babes will act like some of your babes. So for the most part, you guys are just coming for an African flavor of pretty much roughly the same kinds of babes that you'll find in your places, with the exception of a few who have some homegrown cooking skills. But with that said, for the most part, these babes can play you just the same, if not worse, than the babes that you left back home. But what do I know? I'm from a second world country called Kenya, so I might as well just leave that alone and start by saying, welcome to Breaktime on West Side, your number one breakdown podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is a man who's feeling like a prince, but his money is held up. So for $80,000, I should be able to bribe an official, get my gold, and send you your money back with interest. He's a man who still wonders why astrology isn't the study of us. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. The show is Battle of the Sexes, our weekly love, sex, and relationships show where I get to talk about scammers, I get to talk about people in love. Sometimes I might disagree with people on a few things, but normally I like to come through with that conclusion. And if you agree with it, if you don't agree with it, if you want to give some sort of topic that we should be discussing, or you just want to say hi, then at Breaktime on Westside on Facebook and on IG is where you can reach me at. The DMs are always open. On Twitter, you can slide into my personal DMs, which is at Bagaka the D, and I would be more than happy to receive your messages, receive your feedback, and I usually appreciate that shit. So you can keep it coming, and a massive thank you to each and every one of you that listens to this podcast. Now, I have a bunch of things that I need to talk about on this particular episode, mainly just two different kinds of relationships that I kind of need to break down. But before I get into the main part of discussing what exactly made up the topic for this episode, I need to discuss something I found particularly interesting. Now, this past weekend, there was a member of parliament who was busy trying to advertise his resort in Narok, who said that he has a cabin where, and this is something that he said with his own words, girls cannot change their minds and boys get value for money. And of course, when I read this, I knew that, there's definitely something to be discussed here. So I'm going to read for you the entire breakdown of the article, which says, and I quote, Yala Member of Parliament David Ole Sankok has stirred the hornet's nest after an attempt to market his Narok-based resort raised a few eyebrows. While speaking on his official TikTok account, Sankok urged the public to visit the Osim Country Lodge in Narok County, a getaway hotel which sits on his expansive 28-acre farm. Located about 10 kilometers away from Narok town, Osim Country Lodge offers a unique opportunity for visitors to bring along a live goat or cow and have it slaughtered and barbecued right at the premises, with the help of professional Maasai butchers. End quote. Now, firstly, while people were actually discussing a bunch of these things, after reading this entire thing, I feel like the bigger error in this entire issue isn't even the babes and the whole, they can't say no and everything and they can't change their minds. It's actually the fact that you're going to a resort, which is more or less a place where you're supposed to get treated. It's pretty much a hotel, but you have to bring your own live goat or cow to have it slaughtered and barbecued right there. As if they're not supposed to have it in the package or something. Or as an additional fee so they can get their own cow or their own goat and slaughter it. I found that shit to be very, very weird to me. But considering that people focused more on taking meat under bad conditions than actually you getting the meat to take it there, I figured, I might as well just leave that one aside and deal with, whatever's there. Because most of the comments that were coming out were women who are talking about how, this sounds very rapey. It sounds like he's a sexual predator or an enabler, and this is just bad. Oh, this sounds very wrong and it's not good to women. And the entire time, all of these comments that are just being said like this are actually coming from women. But interestingly enough, most of the niggas, actually, if I'm not wrong, it should be just about near all of them, were this actually sounds like a particularly good idea. And there were a lot of dudes that were very much for the entire idea. And of course, this is probably a clout chase and everything, and most of the dudes probably won't go there, let alone leaving Nairobi and shit. But when I kind of looked at the way people were having split views on this entire thing, while the babes can call it rapey or predatory behavior, I kind of understand why the dudes are for this. Because there's just something about a lot of babes, And especially in this day and age, I find to be very odd. There's a lot of babes that like to practice what I think I used to call selective ignorance, which usually tends to be very convenient. And it's like they have this level of naivete where they can see all of this treatment that's being done for them. And this guy making moves here and there, trying to be a little bit touchy, trying to allude to a certain few things. And then all of a sudden, when the guy wants to engage in the act, that's when their naivete springs up at its peak and they're like, oh shit, you never said that we were fucking. And they then now start to bring up the whole bit of, if you'd have been upfront with your interests, then I'd have probably turned you down sooner because I don't normally do this, or I have a boyfriend, or I'm not supposed to be doing this, or I don't see why we had to leave town for you to try this. Like, they'll always bring that up, and yet the reality of it is they properly knew and understood your interests. You just didn't understand their disinterest, or at least their disinterest in fucking you, but their interest in taking advantage of whatever benefits you were giving them because you wanted to shag them. And it's something that I find to be very, very annoying with a lot of babes, because in a lot of cases, more so whenever you find a situation of a guy wants to go on a trip with you and this guy wants to shag you, but you're acting like that's not what's going to happen. You find that, especially for a guy like that who can afford to take the both of you out on a trip to go to a place for a weekend or some shit, if you'd have turned him down, he'd have probably gotten another babe who'd have been willing to shag him to come. Like, a lot of times, and this is something that doesn't necessarily just affect people who go on trips, even when you're trying to visit a babe or you tell her to come over and you're trying to do the same thing and the babe is like, nah, I should have been upfront. Like, most times if you'd have just flat out said no, dude would have probably gone and looked for someone who can satisfy his needs where you can't. Like, it's not like it's that hard to mention, but there's a lot of babes that like to play selective ignorance, and I do not like that shit. And especially in this day and age where we know very well that young people have been fucking from like 17, 18, if not earlier, and you don't have to beat around the bush of being unsure. Like, you can actually get a lot more done because you guys know exactly what it is that brought you wherever you are. And if you're particularly interested in getting down with whatever it is that you are in, like, it's not that hard. I think it's just that some people like to take advantage of people, or should I say males, that aren't confident enough to clearly state out the fact that they want to lay pipe. Because 8 times out of 10, these guys actually like the babe and they don't want the babe to look at them like they're busy viewing her as some sort of prostitute, or are busy trying to objectify her as nothing but a fuck toy that has a bit of life in her. And it's unfortunate that there's some babes that do this, and honestly, I wish some of y'all would just grow up and understand that taking advantage of people isn't good. And the idea of weaponizing consent might seem good right now, but trust me, there's situations that you might get into where the people that you're trying to play this game on won't be so cordial or even so moral. So just be careful with that shit. But either way, I am going to leave it at that because I do have a main topic to discuss. So, moving things on. Now, while I was on Reddit not too long ago, I stumbled upon a very interesting post by some person referred to as our typical camera 506. And they put up a post titled "Something Most Men Need to Hear." And the very first sentence is, "Relationships are a bad investment." Now, of course, if you know me, Sir Denver B, break time on my side, like, I see this and my interest is automatically piqued. So I am going to read the entire post for you, then give you my thoughts on it, because I feel like this post alludes to something that sounds fairly similar, which is, broke guys not dating because dating is an investment. So let me just read it for you. So it says, and I quote, "Relationships are a bad investment." There, I said it. Here are some reasons why I'm never getting into another relationship ever again. Number 1, this applies to a good number, if not most, but not every woman. I just wanted to get that out there. Most women are gonna get bored at one point or another. I don't care how much you make, how tall you are, how nice you dress, how fit you are, how big your dick is, whatever the hell you do, she's gonna get bored eventually. I don't care if you are alpha, I don't care if you are the leader of all alphas, I don't care if you created the alphas, she's gonna get bored of you too, okay? And you could have your own stable business or career, and it could play out in a couple of ways. A, you are always working, she's gonna get bored because she's alone, and guess who she's gonna call or text? Some other guy. Or it could play out another way. You are home most of the time, she sees you too much and gets bored of you. Guess what she's gonna do? She's gonna be texting other guys right there in bed with you. Another thing is, most women are never happy or satisfied. You can bring the sun down to the earth for her and she'll say, what about the moon? What about the stars? You know, it's never enough with some of these women. I have an idea of what success looks, and I know that trying to go after everything is exhausting and quite frankly just not necessary. If I make 100k, I may be satisfied with that, but she might not. My friend might make $1 million and she goes behind my back and starts talking to him. It's a bad investment. Your energy is better spent on other things than trying to please and or attract women. A lot of guys are out here breaking their backs just to make women happy, especially hopeless romantic men. The truth is, most women, especially attractive ones, are not sugar and spice and everything nice. Don't spend too much of your energy trying to attract women. It's kinda exhausting and quite frankly painful, pointless and overrated. Quick note, this isn't some anti-woman post. Are there good women out there? Sure, but a good number aren't really worth the effort. End quote. Okay, now to kind of start things off, I'm gonna start by saying that this guy caught my attention and I actually liked the very first 2 sentences, but after that, it just sounded like a bunch of horseshit to me. Like, I kind of just read this entire thing and I'm like, really, nigga? Are you sure? Because there's so much that I can refute here, but at the end of the day, because I didn't want to just go out there and just directly call him bitter, I figured I might as well just try and break down whatever it is that he's trying to say, because I don't think that his reasons actually make sense. Like, the initial statement was right, or at least it could be right if you decide to phrase it a certain way, which I think I'll try doing even at the end. But to be completely honest, like, everything that he said here sounds very subjective, and yes, it might happen to a couple of people, but this isn't the common situation everywhere else. But with that said, in typical Breaktime on West Side fashion, let's break this down and see if he's actually speaking some sense here or not. Maybe I kinda missed something. Now, first of all, he did say that relationships are a bad investment, and well, normally most people measure investments based off of an ROI or return on investment, and essentially, if you were to try and measure it, it's a little bit hard to actually say what a good return on investment is, because on one end, you can say it's you getting married and having kids. On another end, it could be a supportive partner that will always be down to ride for you and, you know, always helps you be at peace when you're at home. On the other end, it could be, you know, your heart feeling fulfilled. Like, there's a bunch of different ways that you can measure ROI, at least in a relationship, because there's some people that are going to date you for a couple of months, but, you know, even though they spent a fuck ton of money, they're going to be happy that they dated you and they feel like they got a good return, or at least a positive return, because you made them feel great. But there's people that are gonna date for like a year plus and feel like they didn't get a good return because even though they didn't spend too much, probably they didn't feel as fulfilled with the person that they dated. So that's a little bit hard to kind of measure out. And with that said, like, are most women really going to get bored of like the relationship regardless of who you are? I don't know. It's a little bit hard to actually say for certain, because the way this guy is making it sound, it's like, you know, whatever the hell happens, when you get into a relationship, you get bored. Alright, fine. Like, how exactly would you say that is supposed to be prevented? Like, are you supposed to constantly create drama as a man? Are you supposed to be toxic so that, you know, there's days when she's happy, but other days when she's sad and other days when she's crying? Like, are you supposed to do some shit that is supposedly so uncouth, but you keep her interested? Like, at the end of the day, if you are going to have a good relationship, which usually tends to be the long-lasting ones, you kind of have to be comfortable with the fact that relationships are boring, or at least the good ones are. All the bliss, all the good feelings that you guys are gonna have in the initial stage, like, that's all honeymoon phase shit. The moment stuff actually gets to a point where you guys will not be going out as much, you guys won't just be meeting and fucking every single moment. Like, when you guys can go to each other's places and literally just chill and do nothing but spend time together, even though you're just watching a movie or just cuddling or just talking, like, that's usually part of the stuff that makes the relationship good. Like, I've said this for a very long time, and I don't think enough people hear it, but I'm just gonna say it again. Good relationships are meant to be boring, because at the end of the day, it's not like you're always gonna have fun. Like, the fun is always gonna be great and all, but the reality of it is, it's not like it's always going to be fun. Some days are gonna be shit, some days are gonna be good, some days you're gonna want to be alone, some days you're gonna hate your partner, but some days you're going to absolutely love your partner. Some days you are going to appreciate how supportive they are. Some days you're going to look back and you're like, you know what, I don't know if this is the person that I'd have wanted to be with from day one, but I'm very glad that I'm with them, and you're very appreciative of that. Like, some days you're just gonna look at them and you're like, they're alright. And at the end of the day, the fact that you guys stayed together, the fact that you guys appreciate each other despite all of those feelings, is what will make your relationship feel all the more worthwhile. Because you guys tried to complete each other and were there for each other for the longest time, and you guys have a bunch of shared experiences. Like, at the end of the day, it being boring is actually a good thing. Like, because it's either boring or it's going to be toxic. Because as the saying goes, bad boys ain't no good, good boys ain't no fun. And you can even switch that up with girls and it'll still give you the same exact result. Because at the end of the day, good relationships are supposed to be boring. And to be quite honest, like, you read most of this shit and it just sounds like a guy who has either heard of a lot of cheating stories or has seen his friends get cheated on, even though they're in a lot of these relationships and they don't like it, or they've probably been cheated on and they feel like a bunch of shit. And most of this cheating doesn't even sound physical, it sounds emotional. Because yes, she's texting other guys. Okay, it might be wrong depending on the intention, but at the end of the day, that's her choice. Like, who the fuck says that reflects on most or even all women? Taking a few samples here and there and using them to conclude that this is the truth for every single woman is probably a little bit misleading, especially if the sample size is a very, very small number of cases. Then, with that said, like, there's this shit that you hear people saying, like, with like the hopeless romantic man, and you know, they break themselves backwards and everything and shit like that. And usually whenever people read this, they usually just come down to this whole conclusion of, the guy was simping, he's bad for this, blah, blah, blah. And yet the truth of it is, there's actually differences between simping and actually being a caring person. Like, not all deeds that are supposedly generous and caring and affectionate should be classified as simping and actually classify as simping. Because it's not like you treating your girlfriend very well and you going out of your way to try and ensure that you can be as sweet and as caring of a boyfriend because you love your partner should always be classified as simping. Yes, are there instances why it's simping? Yes, definitely. But does it mean that all these sweet deeds should be considered simping? No. Sometimes you're just a romantic person. Sometimes you're just a caring partner. It's like people just want the most heartless fuckers, the most downright emotional on the inside but hard on the outside type partners that never do anything sweet for them so that they can consider them to be good boyfriends. I've never really understood this shit. And to be very honest, I think some people just need to accept it, in as much as yes, there is simping. At the very same time, you can go be affectionate, treat your woman right, and she will still cheat on you. And it's not because you simped, and it's not because you're a simp, it's simply because she's a shit human being. Like, people need to accept that as well. Sometimes the woman is just a shit human being. It's not that you're a simp, you're actually a caring person, she's just a shit human being. And trust me, even though you acted hard, even though you treated her like shit, if she's a shit piece of a human being, she will still treat you like shit at some point. Like, however it is you want to play it, sometimes there's just shitty people. It's not that the other person that's doing all the good is simping. Which leads me back to the original question that started all of this. Are relationships a bad investment? Well, to be honest, that depends. But for the most part, I don't think relationships are a bad investment. I think it's mostly a case of the intentions that you have and the kind of person that you get into that investment with, or should I call it a relationship? But at the end of the day, if you decide to get into a relationship and you do well by your side, or at least you live up to your part of the entire deal, your intentions are good and the partner that you chose was great, like, at the end of the day, it's not a bad investment. trust me, it is not a bad investment to say the least. It's actually a great one and can even be a lot better for you as an individual, whether you are male or female. But the problem is, a lot of people usually like to think that because there's shit partners out here, that the problem is the investment. And yet the problem is actually the partners. To which I will conclude by saying this. At the end of the day, most investments aren't actually bad investments. Because if you look at it and you fundamentally see it as an investment, then at the very least, you expect to get some sort of a return from it. So essentially it's not bad, it's just the kind of return that you get. And of course, if you partner up with the wrong people, or have the wrong intentions, or both, then you end up losing out more than you do gaining. Like, you can even use this same script on something like, say, farming chicken. Like, at the end of the day, if the chickens are gonna give you eggs, then it's going to be a good thing. But if you're getting into it because, you want to have eggs and eat chicken as well, or you have a partner that wants to eat chicken, at the end of the day, it's not like you're going to be making that much profit because you'll be eating the thing that's supposed to give you stock. Although, then again, I might be wrong about this shit, just the same I might be wrong about a lot of other things, so I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open on IG, on Facebook, it is at Breaktime, on my side, on Twitter, it is at Bagaka the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.